Growing up with my dad, we would go hunting every year in the fall, like right around this time of year, and we didn't ever own any property, and so we'd always had to go on like what they call like state-owned land. And the issue with that is that when you would go and you look for a place to sit, I know this, like, for how many of people in the room hunt for deer? Before you've gone hunting for deer. All right, so like 4 of us. Sweet, good to know. Anyhow, so if you don't know kind of how you roll when you go out, you essentially go out and you find a spot to sit in and you sit there all day long and you wait for a deer to walk by. Like, that sounds really boring, doesn't it? Probably. It's amazing though for some of us that just love to just be outside in the woods. But anyhow, we would go out there, we'd find somewhere to sit, and maybe you found like what you would think would be the best spot to sit in. And the challenge with being on property that is owned by the state is anyone can go out there and hunt. And so oftentimes you don't know if someone's going to be, maybe this person was like 3 days before you got there, had looked and found the spot as well. And finally it's the day that it's opening day to hunt, and now you're sitting next to someone, you don't even know about it, right? Like, because you just don't know these things because you don't own that property. So that was kind of the other issue with it, is that you have a lot of people out there walking through the woods at times, and that disturbs the woods. And deer are really skittish animals, and so they don't like humans walking through the woods, and so oftentimes then they start to change their patterns, and maybe they just only come out at night, right? And so your chances hunting on state land oftentimes goes down. And that was just my experience growing up. When I was 16 years old, there was this particular year that we were sitting, we were waiting, and it just wasn't going well, and so we looked for a new spot. And so we drove to this particular area. We were driving down what we would call like a 2-track, right? Like 2 tracks through the woods. It's like made from a car, from a vehicle, right? So a 2-track, we'd go down there for a little bit. We found a spot where maybe we could get out and walk. We found a trail, and we were walking along this trail for maybe a mile or so. About a half mile into this trail, on our right, we could see a large field, and we had decided that maybe this field would be a good spot to sit and to wait and to watch. Why? Because you had like more area to be able to see, right? You didn't have all the trees in the way. So we'd sit on the edge of this field and just watch. Well, here's the deal. So we're walking down this trail, and the field is to our right. Now this is important, right? And we get maybe a mile into this, and we take kind of the edge of the field, and we take a right to go towards the field and kind of walk down a little valley and then up. And then we find a spot. He finds a spot. I walk a little ways down. I find a spot, and we sit there. Now it's getting dark, and so I decide to get up. I go back to my dad, and he gets up, and we begin to walk back. We're walking along the field, and we got to the point where we would maybe take a left, right? Because why we took a right to get to the field, and only common sense would say you take a left to get back the way you came. Now he was thinking differently, and what happened is that he said that, no, I think I was turning left, and he was like, no, I think we went and came from this area, and it's on the other side of the field. Now here's the issue that is taking place in this moment, is that I'm beginning to question, I think my dad has lost it, right? Because you would remember if you crossed the field, and he didn't. I mean, we didn't, right? You would remember such a thing though. Yet he doesn't, and he thinks that we need to cross the field to get on to the trail that we arrived on. And I was like, seriously, and we were going back and forth and kind of arguing. And I got in that moment, see, when I was real young, I got lost in the woods once. And so I got that feeling inside of me like, oh shoot, we're gonna die out here, right? Like that kind of feeling was inside like the pit of my stomach. And so I had this feeling. Now I didn't say this to him, but I was feeling it, and I was like, hey, like what if you just stop talking and just stand right there for a minute? Now I didn't say that to my dad because he had a gun in his hand. But anyway, I was like, what if you just stand right there, and then I'll go back the way that I thought, like, because literally I thought like 25 yards to my left, there would be the trail. And so just stay there. So sure enough, I take a left, I get up on the trail, and I'm like, here it is, right? And I wanted to say like, seriously, dude? So here's what happened though. So yeah, we found the trail, we made our way back, and all is good, right? And we're safe. But here's the deal, like in that moment, like leading up to that moment, I had all my faith and all of my trust in the fact that I believed that my dad knew his way around the woods. And I was just realizing that he's getting old enough now where he's losing his mind, and I cannot trust him. Or at least he lost his way that day, and all of a sudden I lost my faith in him. And so we're on our way back to my parents' cabin up north, and I said, hey, before I step out into the woods tomorrow, we're going to go to the store, and we're going to buy what they call like hunting tape. It's really not sticky tape, it's really like ribbon. And I think they don't want to say it's ribbon because they are like men who made the product. I don't know. But it's this red or pink or orange hunting tape. And so it comes on a roll, and I said, I'm going to go out, and as wherever we go to hunt, I'm going to mark the trees. So you kind of tie a little bow on the limbs, and you mark your path, right? So you know kind of how to get out. And like, he makes fun of me to this day because like that next day, it was like Christmas morning. I was putting the ribbons on like every single tree imaginable because I was not going to get lost. But the reality is that I had no longer trusted my dad. Now, how many of you in the room have had a moment in your life, a relationship that you were involved in, and something happened where you lost trust in that person? Maybe you had shared something with them that you hoped no one would know. Maybe they had a piece of information that they were holding dear to their heart for you. Maybe you trusted them with something that you wanted them to do for you, or whatever it may have been, but somewhere along the line, you lost faith. You lost your trust. And the reality is that we will lose our faith in man and humans because we're not perfect. Maybe we've been on that side of the relationship. Maybe you've been on the side where you lost, where you broke trust, or broke faith in the person that was hoping that they could trust you. But the reality is, and just like my dad, I lost faith in my dad in this particular area. And some of you have experienced that. I know I've experienced that, where I've lost faith in someone. We can lose faith in humans, and sometimes it's broke. But however, God promises we can trust his way. So God makes this promise to humanity that you can trust my way. We look at the book of John. John writes amazing amounts of stories about Jesus. But he has this particular moment that I think is really important for us tonight as we explore this thought. So God promises through Jesus this very thing. Let's check it out. John chapter 14. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? And so Thomas is legitimately asking, we don't know the way. How can we know where you're headed? And Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And so Jesus makes this promise to not only Thomas, but to each and every one of us tonight. That he promises that he is, through him we receive life. Through him we experience the way that God is hoping for us to discover. But there's this particular way, there's this particular life that we can only obtain as we lean into the person of Jesus. That Jesus says that you can only find this. I am the fulfillment of this promise, which is found in John 14. Now, growing up in church, personally, and being taught so many stories from the Bible, or maybe you coming to Edge and hearing and being taught truths and God's hope for your life. We can't just obtain a bunch of knowledge. You see, there's issue if all we do is we sit on the things that we hear. We can't just obtain a bunch of knowledge and expect our trust or our faith in God to grow. And if you've ever found yourself in a moment where you're like, God, I don't know if you're really real. Or God, I don't really know if the way that you would say, or, when Jesus says things like, I've come to give you life and life to the full, if we struggle to believe that, we can't expect that faith to actually become real and to grow in that until we begin to do something about the knowledge that we've been given. We can't just sit and obtain information and expect our relationship or our understanding of God to really become real. So there's this story. This is a fascinating thing that took place in the book of Malachi. But before we read it, I want to bring us up to speed. All right, so there's this period of time in the Jewish history where they've been waiting for someone to deliver them. They've been waiting for a savior, right? They call him the Messiah. They're waiting for this person, this Son of God type person to come and to save them from the lives that they're living, to bring redemption. And there's been all these prophets that have been saying, they've been teaching, they've been talking about what this day will look like when the Messiah eventually shows up onto the scene. Right? So there's been prophet after prophet after prophet. There's these people that have been speaking about the future for years and years and years. They've been communicating what the world and what this person will look like when the Messiah does indeed come. And in Malachi chapter 4, which is the last book of the Old Testament. So we have hundreds of years between the moment that Malachi spoke these words and the time that Jesus actually came. In fact, some say that it was roughly 400 years. So keep that in mind. This person, this prophet, said this thing about Jesus, and then 400 years passed before they actually began to see signs that maybe what Malachi said and other prophets was real. And so Malachi in chapter 4 says this. It says, "But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness," or the Messiah, this person, this godlike person of righteousness, shall rise with healing in his wings. All right, so it's just a small little verse. It's just a small little statement. But when the Messiah comes, he will have healing powers in his wings. Now let's fast forward 400 years. And there's this young lady, this young girl, who grew up in a Jewish home in the first century. And she was being taught all of these things about Jesus. Why? Because it was a part of who they were. It was their education. It was the things that you would do. It was the kind of school they went to. And so they were being taught all these things about Jesus. Just so fascinated by what this magnifying glass. Anyhow, I almost want to look because it looks interesting. Anyhow, I'm tempted to come and sit by you guys. Anyway. So here's the deal. You don't want to miss this. I'm serious. You don't want to miss this. This is absolutely amazing. This young girl who's being taught these truths about God. So one day when she's roughly 12 years old, we'll just say roughly 12. It's that moment in her life where, she comes of age. We're all on the same page. All right. I won't say any further. But here's the deal. It doesn't stop. That sucks. Right? It doesn't stop. And I can make light about it, but here's the reality. The issue is that in Jewish customs, they had this thing about blood. All right? And after 7 days, this person could become clean. And the only way you could become clean after the 7 days is if you would go to this thing called a mikvah, which was a pool of water on the edge of town, which is kind of where we see the Jewish tradition of baptism come into play. And so then they would baptize themselves, and it would signify that I'm clean again, and I can enter into the community and relationships. And in those 7 days, I can't come into contact with people. I can't brush shoulders with someone. I can't sit at the table and eat with them, because if they somehow come into contact with me, then they become unclean, and it becomes this very interesting and challenging dynamic. Well, here's the issue, is that she didn't stop. It never stopped for her, and so she never had this moment where she could then become clean again, so that she could enter back into relationship and into community. See, here's the issue, is that this young lady who finally came of age, she had these hopes and these dreams and all these things that she was looking forward to. She wanted to be a mom, she wanted to be a wife, she wanted to have a family. These are the things that a young woman at the time would long to have. These were the dreams that she had. And in that moment of things kind of slowly fading because she couldn't find a cure. And so here's the challenge, is that the story goes that the family spent all of their money, their savings, on trying to find a cure. They would talk to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they couldn't find a cure. And so what could likely have had happened was that maybe they would have to move out of town and live on the edge of town, and she'd have to be isolated from all of her relationships. She would have to maybe not even eat at the dinner table with her family. Maybe she was in her room. She found herself in places of being isolated from humans. Because if she broke the law, then there was consequence, and oftentimes that would be death, right? So there's this real danger that she's dealing with. And not only that, but she's wrestling with the fact that all of her dreams, and there's this isolation, and she's lonely, and they're desperate for a cure. See, the story begins to take more life when we understand what's at stake, when we understand that all of the things that she had hoped for were fading away as they continued to find roadblock after roadblock after roadblock and not getting the answers they hoped for. And then one day, Jesus was coming into town. And here's the beautiful thing about Jesus during that time is that when he came into town, the whole town came to see what was up. Because Jesus had created a stir that the whole community was beginning to be captivated by. That he would do things in such a way, he would say things in such a way that people wanted to hear what he had to say and they wanted to see what he was going to do. And so when Jesus came to town, you dropped everything and you went to go see him, and you went to go see what was going to happen or hear what was going to be taught. And so her whole family leaves because they hear that this guy, this Jesus, this potentially Messiah is coming to my town. And so they leave to go check it out. And she's faced with this dilemma. Like, I can't leave. I want to go see him, but I can't leave. And in that moment, maybe she remembers the prophet Malachi, who says that when the Messiah comes, he will have healing powers on his wings. And I know that sounds interesting because you're like, wings? Jesus doesn't have wings. So here's another way to translate that in the Hebrew, which is where Malachi was written in Hebrew. In the Hebrew, you can translate that word wings also to the hedges or the edges of someone's garment. Well, here's the fascinating thing about that story is that she then disguises herself and she goes into town and she squeezes into the crowd. And what does she do? For those of us that heard the story before, she touched his clothes, just the edge. You see, if she just sat still and obtained the information, she knew the story, right? She knew the story of Malachi because she was taught the story of Malachi, but it was when she decided to walk out the door is that life and faith became real. You see, you can believe that there's a Messiah, you can believe that there's a Christ, you can believe that there's redemption coming your way, but you don't really know it to be true until you walk out the door. And she was willing to risk even death in that moment because she had put her hopes in what she was taught. And God proved to be right. And then they begin to ask all these questions because Jesus is like, who touched me? Which is a silly question because there's all this crowd around you. And the disciples are even joking about it. And they're like, really, dude? There's a lot of people around you. And he goes, oh, but for real, like, did someone touch me? Because I could feel that there was power that left me. And it was in that moment that she threw herself down in front of Jesus and she said, it was me. And you see, this is what had happened was that I was sick and then I touched you and now I'm not. Like, boom, her life just changed. Like God just became real. That when Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, now she believes that passage because she experienced Jesus being the way, the life, and the truth in that moment. So, about 6 years ago, in 2012, I had a friend of mine reach out to me. Now, I played some sports in high school, football and basketball, and I used to be a lot more in shape. I know that's hard to believe anyhow. So, about 6 years ago, I had a friend of mine who was played football with me, played basketball with me, and he reached out and he said, hey, I'm going to be doing this race in a few months. It's called the Tough Mudder. How many of you have heard the Tough Mudder before? Yeah, it's here at the raceway, Speedway, right? Anyway, so it's 12 miles. For those of you that don't know what the race is, it's 12 miles, it's obstacle courses. And the whole idea is that you don't go to win, you go to run with friends. You go to run with a team and you help each other out. It's this kind of teamwork experience. And he's like, hey, you want to run this with me? And I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, yeah, this is going to be sweet, but like I haven't run in a long time, like a long time. Like the only movement I experienced was like from the couch to the fridge or something. So, I mean, for real, like I was probably 55, 60, maybe 70 pounds overweight. And I just enjoyed my TV watching, Oreo cookie eating time in the evenings. And so that's just what I did. That was my routine. Well, anyway, so he reaches out and he says, hey, you want to run this race? I'm like, sure, but I got to do something about that. And so it was this motivator, right? And so I decided that I was going to eat differently. And I decided I was going to go work out and get in the gym and run and just be committed to this. And I can be somewhat like laser focused with certain things when I commit to them. And so I was like that, and like my snack, like I ate like no carbs for like 4 months, which is dumb. Don't ever do that. I had like a little bit, like I had like pretzels at night sometimes. But anyway, so I was super focused, and so in 3 months, by the time 3 months passed, I had lost 55 pounds, and I was running like 12 miles like 3 times a week, and it wasn't like I was just like frail little person, but I had trainers and I was working hard, and I was going to make this thing happen. But here's my point. Like the concept of running and the concept and the idea of the race was not a reality or a possibility until I began to get off my butt and exercise. Because if I tried to do that when I was like 70 pounds overweight, I would have died like half mile in, like legitimately probably had gone to the ER, right? I mean, there was not a chance of me being able to do that. So it wasn't not a reality or a possibility until I made the decision to exercise. So here's the challenge for us. You read something, you hear something. No, the challenge isn't like we're all gonna like get in the gym tomorrow, right? That's not the challenge, not where I'm going. Here's the challenge for us. We're all going to do a Tough Mudder, all right, in the spring. Is that cool? No, but that would be cool. Anyhow, here's the deal. The challenge to us is that we need to exercise what we know for it to become real. If Jesus is really real to you, then we need to exercise something that he's communicated to us that is a possibility. And we need to wait and see how God moves and shows up and works in our life in the moment. Right? Like if Jesus is really real, and the things that he's taught, then we need to exercise that or it will never become real to us. So here's the challenge, because it's not something easy. It wasn't easy to choose to eat differently and to run and to work out. And that was not an easy thing to do, but results paid off because it was a hard thing to do. It was called exercise. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to exercise our knowledge. All right? So here's 2 things I want you to think about. And maybe you come up with others. But here's 2 things. The first one, and I know you're going to love this one, is honor your parents. Boom. You're like, you suck. But here's the deal. Like, I didn't say it. It's in the scriptures, and Jesus thinks it's a good idea. But here's the deal. Honor your parents. And then there's like this tag line that comes right after it. And it says something like, and so you will live long in the day, like you'll live long days in the land that I give to you. Something like that. And you're like, what does that mean? Right? Here's my attempt. Okay? Honor your parents. And the reason why God wants you to honor your parents is because I want to put it in the context of where we all are at today. You want trust from your parents. You want freedom. You want your parents to trust that what you're going to do is, as you go out with your friends, that they can trust that you're going to do as you say you're going to do. Like you want them to trust that you're going to be fine, that you're going to take care of yourself, that you have the maturity and the responsibility to be able to handle the freedom that you've been given. Then honor them. And what does that look like? Maybe you have this crush on someone, right? Like you like that dude, and you're like, I want to just be friends with him because that's all we're gonna do, right? Is be friends. No one really wants to be romantic in high school, right? Well, anyhow, but your parents have an issue with that young man because maybe he's got some kind of reputation, and they specifically say something to you like, I'm not a fan of that relationship. I would rather you stay away from that relationship. Honor them. Honor them. Right? Guys go the same way. You just flip it around. Honor your parents. Your parents say, hey, I want you home at 9, which sounds ridiculous, and I don't know if any parent does that, but let's just say they say be home at 9. Honor them. But hey, I got this thing, and all my friends and everyone is going to be out till 10. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous. It's probably like 11 and midnight, whatever. You know the context. Honor them. And here's the deal. I think the more that you honor your parents, the more they trust you. And the more they'll respect you. Even if you disagree with them, that's the challenge. The only way you start believing that is if you exercise it. But here's another one. And this one, like, I think anyone in the room. Do you find yourself, I want you to ask yourself this question. Do you find yourself being caught up in drama? Anxious about life, worried about your future, worried about what others think of you, impressing your peers, your friends. Did any of you in the room actually struggle with some of these things where we become worried about what other people think? Where we become anxious about tomorrow, where we start to worry about the future? Do any of us in the room worry about what others think of us when we post certain things? And did we get the right angle when we took that shot? I mean, do we spend enough time on these things because we do care what people think? Listen, we all struggle with it. But here's something that Jesus said. And here's the reality is that sometimes that can become overwhelming. Here's the reality is that we could put all of our focus and all of our energy on worrying about the things that others say or do or think of us. And the reality is that can be overwhelming. But then Jesus says something, and here's the part that we have to exercise. And Jesus says the last will be first, and the first will be last, which is weird. This is a paradox. I don't get it. He also says if you want to receive your life, you will lose your life. So what Jesus is essentially saying is that what if for one day, in the midst of all the stress and anxieties of your lives and in my life, what if for one day we said, I'm going to think about other people. I'm going to do all that I can today to make sure that someone else's day is better. What if just for one day of my week, of my month, what if you just tried it one time where you would just say, for the next few hours, all I'm going to care about, all I'm going to focus on is how can I make that person feel less lonely? Or how can I be friends with this person who seems to not connect with others? What if I went out of my way to help someone out? I mean, what if you were laser focused for one day to say that I'm going to make other people's days better? And that's it. That's all you cared about. Because I believe, and what I've experienced in my life is that I find the most fulfillment when I'm giving my life away. And when Jesus says that you will find your life when you lose it, and he's essentially saying when we can be less self-absorbed and more others-focused, there's something about life that changes. Something about the insides of us that change. All of a sudden, we don't care what someone thinks of me anymore. All of a sudden, I don't really care what happens tomorrow because I'm just so focused and interested in you. And it's a fascinating thing. The challenge for all of us is to take that truth when Jesus says that those who choose to lose their life will gain their life. When we can exercise that. That's the challenge for us. Or you could do the other one, and you could honor your parents, even when you don't want to. I'm going to pray for us. And as we sing